In Vermont and Maine, the lights didn't just dim. They flickered with a warning no storm had delivered. The catalyst was sudden. Canada quietly reduced electricity exports, shaking a cross-border lifeline that had powered New England for more than 60 years. For decades, the grid between Hydro-Québec and ISO-NE supplied up to 30 to 40% of peak winter demand, keeping homes warm and businesses alive. Now, retaliation to Trump tariffs 2025 has reached the power lines, transforming stable energy into a bargaining chip. The ripple effect is amplifying quickly. From household bills to factory floors, from local grids to the global stage of trade politics. A shift in power is emerging, where Ottawa shows it can tighten the switch and Washington must scramble to respond. The stability once taken for granted is suddenly fragile, and the stakes are no longer theoretical. So here's the hanging question. If electricity can be throttled in the dead of winter, what happens when oil and natural gas, far larger lifelines, are next on the line? 6 decades of trust. Since the 1960s, a quiet current of cooperation has flowed across the northern border. Massive hydroelectric projects in Quebec, Manitoba, and Ontario transformed rushing rivers into a steady stream of power, exporting gigawatts of electricity straight into the U.S. grid. For more than 60 years, this arrangement built one of the most reliable partnerships in North America. Canada benefited with a stable stream of revenue, often between $4 and $5 billion annually, supporting provincial budgets and public services. The United States, meanwhile, gained a lifeline of affordable, renewable energy that kept household bills lower and balanced the grid during the harshest winters and hottest summers. Even as disputes erupted over lumber, steel, or agriculture, electricity stood apart as neutral ground. The power lines stretching across the border symbolized something rare: trust that politics would never touch. For governors in New England and families in New York, it became routine to depend on Canadian imports without a second thought. Energy from the north was not just a commodity, it was a safety net, a quiet guarantee that no matter how bitter the trade battles grew, the lights would stay on. That sense of certainty lasted 6 decades, until 2025 revealed just how fragile it really was. Why the shield broke in 2025? For decades, electricity had been the untouchable part of U.S.-Canada trade, immune from politics, even when fights over lumber or dairy escalated. That changed with Trump tariffs 2025, a sweeping set of duties that struck Canadian exports of softwood, grains, and processed goods. Ottawa, under pressure to respond, reached into territory no one expected. In Ontario, regulators floated a 25% surcharge on electricity exports heading south, a signal that the power grid itself was no longer off limits. Though the measure was suspended after backlash from utilities, the political message was crystal clear. At the same time, Hydro-Québec began quietly reducing flows across its inner ties to New England, forcing ISO-NE operators to scramble. What looked like routine maintenance soon revealed itself as a calculated slowdown, designed to show Washington that Canada had leverage where it mattered most. This marked a fundamental break from the past. For 60 years, electricity survived every tariff battle as the safe zone. Now it was being pulled into the arena as a bargaining chip, right alongside lumber and steel. The difference in 2025 was not the existence of tariffs. Those had always come and gone. It was the decision to use energy itself as a weapon, signaling that no part of the relationship was off the table. That's why this moment feels different. Once the shield of trust is cracked, the risk of escalation becomes impossible to ignore. State-by-state dependence. To understand why this crisis feels so dangerous, you have to look at just how deeply certain U.S. states rely on Canadian electricity. Start with Vermont. Roughly 1/4 to nearly 1/3 of its annual power comes directly from Hydro-Québec through long-term contracts. Those deals have kept rates among the lowest in New England, protecting families from some of the volatility that hits neighboring states. Move east to Maine, where the dependence is even sharper. During peak winter demand, more than 60% of the state's electricity can come from Quebec and Newfoundland imports. That means when flows tighten, the impact is immediate, from Portland's neighborhoods to rural communities spread across the north. New York presents a different picture. Its grid is massive and diverse, but Canadian imports still matter. In 2024, Hydro-Québec delivered between 7.7 and 8.8 terawatt-hours, about 5 to 6% of the state's total consumption. While that figure may sound small, it becomes critical during extreme heat or frigid cold, when every additional megawatt helps prevent outages. By comparison, Massachusetts is less directly dependent, but it still feels the ripple effect. When the regional wholesale market surges, every state connected to ISONE pays the price. State Dependency Scorecard, approx. Vermont, 25 to 30%. Maine, 60% plus seasonal peak. New York, 5 to 6% overall, vital in peaks, Massachusetts. Lower direct reliance but exposed via market pricing. The deeper the reliance, the sharper the pain when the current slows. And the more vulnerable households and industries become if politics keep the switch half closed. Prices and reliability risks. When Canada pulled back its exports, the effects showed up almost instantly in the numbers. In February 2025, wholesale electricity prices in ISO New England spiked to nearly $126 per megawatt hour. By March, they eased back toward $45 to $47 per megawatt hour. But even at that lower range, costs were nearly double compared to the same period a year earlier. For households and industries, that meant bills stayed stubbornly high despite headlines suggesting improvement. The reality is that four major drivers shape this volatility. First, extreme weather pushes demand to dangerous peaks, whether through frigid cold snaps or summer heat waves. Second, natural gas prices often set the marginal cost of power, and spikes ripple directly into the wholesale market. Third, grid maintenance and transmission constraints limit the ability to move electricity where it is needed most. And fourth, Canadian imports, once reliable, now act as a pressure point that can either stabilize or destabilize the system. This combination creates a dangerous equation. If imports tighten during a severe cold snap, operators may have no choice but to ration electricity. That means rolling blackouts, turning power on and off neighborhood by neighborhood just to keep the grid alive. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation has been blunt in its warnings. For the Northeast, between 30 and 40% of peak winter stability depends on steady Canadian flows. What was once considered a backstop is now seen as a fault line. And if that line cracks at the wrong moment, millions could be left in the dark when they need power most. Canada's view. Why Ottawa and the provinces acted. From the Canadian perspective, the decision to scale back exports was not only about retaliation, it was also about survival at home. In Quebec and Ontario, provincial leaders face the same pressure that American governors do. Keep the lights on in homes heated through long, punishing winters. When demand spikes, domestic load must come first. That priority means if supplies tighten, exports are the first lever to pull. Hydroelectricity, while abundant, is not immune to nature's limits. Fluctuating river flows and lower reservoir levels have left utilities cautious about overcommitting. A dry season or reduced snowpack can cut generation, forcing Hydro-Québec and Manitoba Hydro to conserve for local needs. Layered on top is the politics of trade. Trump tariffs 2025 placed heavy duties on lumber, grain, and processed goods, hitting Canadian provinces directly. Cutting back electricity exports sent a symbolic but powerful message. Canada would no longer shield energy from the crossfire. For provincial governments, that stance also resonates with voters. Framing the decision as both retaliation and protection helps leaders signal toughness abroad while reassuring households at home. The outcome is a policy shaped by more than tariffs alone. It is a blend of domestic priority, environmental constraint, and political calculation. That is why energy exports, once treated as sacrosanct, are now seen as fair game in the broader contest of U.S.-Canada relations. Impact on industry and households. When electricity prices surge, heavy industry feels the pain first. In aluminum smelting, steel making, and paper production, electricity makes up 30 to 40% of total costs. Even a modest increase in wholesale prices can turn thin margins into heavy losses. Plants in upstate New York or rural Kentucky face tough choices. Cut back production, idle furnaces, or risk going into the red. The ripple doesn't stop there. Food processing is another sector on the front line. Cold storage facilities, meat processors, and packaging plants run 24 hours a day, relying on steady, affordable power. When rates climb, those higher costs filter directly into supermarket shelves. It shows up in the price of a steak, a gallon of milk, or a bag of frozen vegetables. For families, the shock lands hardest at home. Households in northern states already pay steep heating bills every winter. With electricity now squeezed, monthly utility costs could rise by an estimated $80 to $120, depending on consumption and local rates. For many low and middle-income families, that difference is not just inconvenient, it is crushing. Community groups in Vermont and Maine have issued warnings. They say thousands of households could fall behind on payments as bills pile up through the coldest months. The choices quickly become stark. Turn the thermostat down, fall into debt, or cut back on essentials like food and medicine. This is how a trade dispute escalates into a kitchen table crisis. For companies, it threatens competitiveness and jobs. For families, it jeopardizes the most basic guarantee, keeping the lights on and the heat running through another winter. What choices does America have? With winter bearing down and power flows uncertain, Washington faces a set of unenviable options. Option 1, limited negotiation. The White House could seek a temporary deal with Ottawa, offering partial concessions on tariffs in exchange for restoring electricity exports. Such an agreement would ease immediate pressure on households and industries, but in an election year, it risked being framed as political weakness. Option 2, energy retaliation. Congressional hardliners have called for countermeasures targeting Canadian oil, natural gas, aluminum, and lumber. This approach projects toughness, but it also risks triggering a full-blown energy war that could send fuel and power prices soaring across North America. Canada is the single largest foreign supplier of energy to the United States. Retaliation would invite swift and painful counterpunches. Option 3, diversification. Washington could accelerate alternative supply routes, including more imports from Mexico, or fast-track major infrastructure projects. The Champlain-Hudson Power Express, a 1,250-megawatt line linking Quebec to New York, is scheduled to come online in 2026. Battery storage and demand response programs could also reduce reliance on imports by smoothing peaks and adding flexibility. But these measures take years, not weeks, to deliver real relief. The trade-off is clear. Quick fixes provide short-term survival but carry high political costs. Aggressive retaliation satisfies domestic hawks but risks escalation. Long-term solutions build resilience but leave families exposed for now. Every pathway has its price: speed, cost, political credibility, or stability. And with each passing week of uncertainty, the window for choosing narrows. America must decide whether to prioritize immediate relief or invest in structural reform, knowing that either path will shape not just this winter, but the next decade of U.S.-Canada energy relations. 3 scenarios for the next 90 to 180 days. Looking ahead, the coming months could unfold in one of 3 very different ways. Scenario 1, de-escalation. In this path, Washington and Ottawa reach a limited compromise that allows electricity flows to return closer to normal. Imports from Hydro-Québec and Ontario stabilize, and wholesale prices gradually ease. Household bills begin to soften, though not overnight. The probability here is low to medium, since it requires political concessions in an election year. Scenario 2, status quo. Canada keeps exports inconsistent, reducing flows at times but avoiding an outright cutoff. ISO, INE, and NUESO grids continue to ride a roller coaster of price swings, tied closely to weather extremes. A mild winter keeps conditions manageable. A harsh one exposes vulnerabilities. Consumers remain stuck with unpredictable bills, and industries operate under constant uncertainty. The likelihood of this scenario is medium to high, as neither side gains nor concedes much. Scenario 3, escalation. Canada tightens exports significantly, whether for domestic priority or political leverage. New England faces soaring spot prices, and utilities begin preparing for rolling blackouts. A severe cold snap could force rationing, neighborhood by neighborhood. This is the nightmare outcome. Unlikely but not impossible. The probability is low, but the consequences would be severe. Taken together, these three scenarios highlight the stakes. North America is entering a winter where every megawatt matters, and the margin for error has never been thinner. For more than 60 years, the U.S.-Canada electricity link stood as a symbol of trust and stability. It was the one area of trade immune to politics, the silent lifeline that kept the lights on and homes warm. Now that shield has cracked. Trump tariffs 2025 pushed Ottawa to use energy as leverage, turning a safe zone into a new battleground. The lesson is clear. Even the most dependable partnership can break under pressure. As we head into the heart of winter, there are three critical signs to watch. First, the daily flow of imports from Hydro-Québec into New England. Second, reliability assessments from NERC that show just how fragile the regional grid really is. And third, the progress of the Champlain-Hudson Power Express project, a long-term solution that could redefine New York's energy security by 2026. These indicators will tell us whether the situation cools down, drags on, or tips into escalation. But the bigger question remains. If electricity can be weaponized, what happens when oil and natural gas, far larger lifelines, are pulled into the fight? Could America withstand a winter without secure energy? That's the debate we'll continue tracking here. So let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us as we break down the next chapter in